Investigators are now looking into an incident at a Corbin trans rights rally that went viral on social media. Back on June 3rd, LGBTQ advocates were protesting in Corbin against a bill that would Senate Bill 150. Video shows two men confronting the group. Participants say the men threatened to kill them, and one claimed to be a member of the KKK. Police eventually showed up to de-escalate that situation. Well, today, the Corbin Police Department says they have now referred this incident to the FBI.